publish these shortly. Just keep an eye on the pizza film, please. I've included links for the milestones that Damien has been talking about, so they're there, they'll be there for you. Right, so yeah, I mentioned PyCon AU. That happened at the end of November, which was great. It was a really big event as usual, and there's a few MicroPython features. So I've linked the videos here. One from Anthony Joseph, who I hadn't met before the event, but he was using MicroPython to do automated watering of plants, and so pretty interesting how he went through all this and ended up using sort of various techniques to determine when plants should be watered to try to minimize the amount of water to maximize the amount of growth. So yeah, it was quite interesting. And Damien and Julian talked about the Kookaberry, which is a device that Julian and Damien have been working on for some time to try to get into the education sector. So talking about some of the difficulties with doing that and how to target children and all the things that they've worked on there. Pretty interesting to have a look at the Kookaberry as a bit of hardware, but also as a bit of software. Like there's been a lot of effort to allow block-based programming, but then lead on to regular Python programming. So I think that's well worth to listen. And then that was my talk, which it was okay. Talking about various things that we always talk about here, so MP Remote and some of the other tools that we all like. So they're all there, linked if you'd like to see them. And there's also, like if you're interested in regular Python stuff, there's nearly 90 videos there that you can go watch. So yeah, it's great. I've already mentioned Hans and the Octoprobe. You can see we've got quite a few of those boards accumulating now. Reverse engineering MicroPython. So at the recent DEF CON 32, this was back, I think it was October, Wesley McGrew spoke about reverse engineering MicroPython frozen modules. So if you guys have got an interest in cybersecurity, really good talk to look at. Basically how you take like a frozen MicroPython bytecode and how you extract that into actual code that you could do something with. It's a pretty interesting talk. We have talked about getting away from Meetup, but that's on hold at the moment. It looked like an automated system that the PSF had set up to request if we wanted to apply for a grant, because it seems like a lot of people using Meetup to organize Python meetups, and the PSF looks like they're granting grants for people running Python meetups in Meetup. There's a lot of duplication of words. Anyway, I've applied for that grant. We'll see how we go. Yeah, I did look at other options, but it's hard to get over the fact we've got like 1,000 users in Meetup now, and although it's expensive, it's a bit painful. It's can't find anything that's significantly better. So yeah. Not a whole bunch of new hardware. I did get one of the new IMX RT1011 boards. These are fast. They're 500 megahertz, pretty powerful, and $15 US. So they're pretty good, cheap option. So I've got that here if you guys want to play with it. I've also bought the new NRF 54L series from Nordic. I don't know what to do with this just yet. It's just that it's a board that it's a chipset that we use quite a lot or have investigated quite a lot with work. So I wanted to have that in the back pocket. So again, if you're interested in one of the better BLE radios, this thing does thread and matter and BLE. Yeah, I have one of those.
I also got one of these the other day.
Ah, did you? Yeah, cool. So interestingly, they're only supporting the Zephyr HAL with this. So we can support that through the Zephyr port, but yeah, interesting decision for Nordic. Waveshare have released a really small ESP32P4. So if you're looking to get the new fancy chipset from ESP, these are a really good entry. They're pretty cheap for the power you get. They're a dual core 400 meg chipset, tons of flash, tons of RAM. They've also got Wi-Fi on these chips via another ESP chip. So it's kind of interesting. And it's in like a little 50mm by 50mm package. I see a comment, but I can't see what it was. Sorry. Yeah, $32 is a lot cheaper than the 100 odd that the dev kit from Espressif costs because it comes with a display and well, a bunch of other stuff. Liligo, I think we covered this a couple of months ago. This is the T Keyboard S3 Pro, which is like it's got an ASP S3 in there. It's also an STM32 in there to do something. I'm not sure exactly what, but yeah, it's 4 or 5 buttons. The 5th button can be replaced by a rotary encoder. Each of these buttons has a little display on the front of them, a 128 by 128 display. And these little keyboards can be stacked up to 6 deep in either of the sides. You can sort of see there's like a little magnetic latch on each of the sides. What you do with this is an open question. But yeah, interesting device. The ESP side of it can run MicroPython, so we can use the recently we'll be able to use like the USB HID stuff on the ESP32. That's recently been added to MicroPython. So yeah, interesting device. Not cheap. They're $60 odd US. And they've also got a slave device, which I think that's what they call it. And I think it doesn't have the ESP32, but I'm not sure. So if you're interested, take a look. In other news, in the Inspiring Computing podcast, there's a really interesting interview with, what was his name? Philip Rack, who was in the Czech Aerospace Research Center, and they used MicroPython in space. And so he talks about the interesting things they had there with a CubeSat. Yeah, it was a really cool interview. I'd highly recommend if you got any interest in sort of aerospacey kind of stuff. There is a sand drawing robot by Travis Howes. He's been working this. I see his commit history goes back about 4 years, but it looks like he had a burst of activity in the last couple of months. And it's a huge effort to do this sand drawing robot. So underneath the sand there's an interesting 2-axis robot. The sort of is 3D printed these cogs to make it work. And he's got all the software in MicroPython to drive this thing to draw really interesting patterns. There's some really good videos, and there's also some really good write-up on his wiki about the woodworking side of it, as well as the electronic construction. So yeah, if that sort of tickles your fancy, it's a really interesting one. There's a project by Dave Wickham, Termoni, who's had a couple of cameras mounted to his helmet and to his bike. And he wanted to monitor the status of these cameras, whether they were recording or not, and what the battery was. So he could look at it on his one of these T-Watches, which is a LilyGo device. And so he built the software to do so, including all of the protocols to communicate with the cameras. And I think that's the most valuable part here. We can do a remote control of either a GoPro or a TomTom Bandit, which I hadn't heard of before, but a couple of cameras with some interesting BLE protocols. Corin's been active on the Discord and the discussion forums. He's been working on this temp project, which is a MicroPython graphics library, and it's designed specifically, or I guess the main goal of it was to improve data visualization stuff. So all of these things are designed to run on quite small displays with low memory, and he's used like partial frame buffers to tile the output, so it uses low memory. But the output's looking really good. So yeah, if that's of interest to you, go check that out. He's looking for people to help test. So if this is of interest, yeah, do reach out. He's been really responsive. The Pocket Spectrometer by China Devarapu. This is a really cool little project where he's got an M5 stack. What are they called? I can't remember which one. The M5 Stick C, which is a little ESP32 with a display that you can buy from M5 Stack quite cheaply. And then there's a spectrometer sensor on the side there. So this thing does spectroscopy, like low-end sort of spectroscopy, in a device that costs, I think he was aiming for under $50 or something. So if you know about spectroscopy, that'll probably be of interest to you because these things are quite expensive. Yeah, very interesting little project. Some quick bites. So ULab looks like they're looking for help. So ULab, a bunch of people have probably used here before. It's sort of like our NumPy equivalent in MicroPython. But yeah, in the recent OpenMV newsletter, Zoltan, who's the ULab, the coolest name ever, by the way, who's the ULab primary developer, has said that they're looking at using the ARM extensions, the Helium instruction set, to do additional accelerated math. So if that's something that, yeah, again, is of interest to you, go check that out. Mike had a really cool, I just got some feedback from him that he's published the code for a PIO driver for his 480 by 480 displays. PIO is a hardware module of the Raspberry Pi 2040 and the 2350. This particular one runs on the 2350, and he's got some really smooth images coming out of it, which is, I don't know if you've seen the Bad Apple animation, but it should play here. We're not, I don't know how well this is going to look over the connection, but you can sort of see it is playing pretty smoothly. I think he's got 30 frames a second on the 480 by 480 LCD, so looks really cool. And it's also playing the sound from it too, of PWM sound. So yeah, I thought that was worth noticing. Final thoughts. Hacking robot vacuums. So that was all the big news I had. I had to cut it down a bit this month because of PyCon. There was too much going on. Hacking robot vacuums was a really interesting article by ABC Australia, where they were looking at cybersecurity angle of hacking into a robot vacuum with a camera on it, and it turned out to be super easy to do. And so this guy, you can see he's just looking down his robot vacuum, but it was 4 stories up. The guy who was doing the hacking was outside of the building 4 stories away, and this is all being transferred over. They penetrated on a regular robot vacuum. There was no additional hacks put in place beforehand. They just managed to figure out an exploit that allowed them to get onto this thing and access the camera, and even announce these things have a speaker on it, and they figured out how to announce some audio on it. It scared the heck out of this guy when they said, "Hi, I've taken over your robot." So yeah, it was also interesting because the company hadn't done anything about it when they'd reached out to tell them of these exploits until they've sort of eventually sort of published publicly that it's possible to do. I guess it was just interesting because like there's a lot of applications where we don't really think about cybersecurity as being too important, but you put a camera on something or a speaker on something, you give it a way to be accessed from the outside, someone will figure out how to do it. So you better think about those angles. Just a quick note too, Blue Sky's gotten a lot of attention, I guess, in the last couple of months, I guess, especially with I guess Elon kicking own goals, but it's actually turned into a really useful resource, and I'm finding a lot more stuff published there and a lot more people sort of I guess joining in that conversation, particularly around MicroPython. I'm looking for stuff to talk about, so I would suggest it's worth having a look, and that is it.